The 2024 picture Civil War by Alex Garland is not great, but it's quite good, especially by comparison to its direct competitors, which have all been unequivocally terrible and unoriginal. But how do you tell a story of a civil war in present-day United States in an original fashion? Well, start by making art rather than a political sermon. And this picture manages that in an environment thought of as impossible to do it. But the picture also has some elements of niche into it. Yes, there will be spoilers. Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Alright, so last Sunday I made the second exception in the last decade to my personal rule of not watching mainstream American movies and applying minus 5,000 points a priori to any movie made in English. In other words, a movie in English has to be, especially one made by Hollywood, has to be exceptional in some way for me to bother watching it, even more so to watch it in a theater. But I did so with Civil War after pirating it first and watching it on fast forward looking for reasons to decide against it, and since I couldn't find any obvious one and one cinema in the city decided to roll it towards 11 p.m. which fits my circadian rhythm, I said fine, let's give it a shot, it could be good, and it was. So much so that it goes on my very short list of American movies in the last 15 years I dare recommend to others as well. So, here's the good parts of it. Throughout the 110 minutes or so, there are a list of words that do not appear at all in the movie. And that is the good part. Nowhere in the movie you hear the following words: Democrat, Republican, fascism, communism, Congress, corruption, racism, xenophobia. The word insurrectionist appears twice in the speech of the negative character. In other words, the movie is not a sermon. There is a fleeting mention to Portland Maoists, which I admit made me chuckle, as being one of the warring factions, and the acting president is compared to Muammar al-Gaddafi, Mussolini and Ceausescu in the context of dictators captured and being revealed as far less than the men they projected themselves to be in official propaganda on TV. And that's really the extent of politics being present in the movie. There are also some subtle allusions about the reasons of the Civil War, but always leaving it to interpretation, which is exactly what art should do, or at least good art. For instance, it is mentioned that the acting president is toward the end of his third term, thus with the implication that he had usurped the rule of law, lending credence to the secessionists. It also mentioned that the usurping president had abolished the FBI, which lends credence to the left-wing paranoia that the country would fall apart without this 100-year-old bureaucracy. Yes, I know the FBI claims to be founded in 1908, but let's get real, it's from the J. Edgar Hoover period onwards that everyone not insane has a problem with. But overall, the movie doesn't make bold political claims, which is smart. The vultures had been anxiously waiting to see if the movie favors Republicans or Democrats, and the vultures were right. Far too often today, compared to the past, movies and TV shows are made with present-day political interest in mind, and not for greatness and to survive the test of time. The vultures were also pretty upset that the main secessionist faction, the Western Forces, were a coalition between Texas and California. Both left-wing and right-wing grifter commentators were really upset about this. "What do those two have in common? That would never happen in reality," cried the chattering NPCs. And I'm like, well, I don't know, actually. The most military hardware is in Texas and California, and the two most populous states are the most likely to raise a competent and numerous enough army. The combined population of Texas and California is bigger than the population of the United Kingdom. If those two were a separate country, they'd be a bigger military power than the United Kingdom and Germany combined. Also, if the Civil War broke out as a result of the president usurping the rule of law, something which would definitely upset Texas, and by abolishing the FBI, which would be very haram in California, such a coalition is in fact not beyond the realm of possibilities, even accounting for present-day political tension. So once again, good stuff on realism. But the part that I really liked is the part of some of the dialogue. As someone who played war photographer and as someone who stands a great chance of ending like Sami at some point in the future, Sami, a character in the in the film, I have to say that whoever consulted for this movie knew the real deal. When the younger character said, "I've never felt so afraid in my life, but also never felt more alive," I was there in the theater and I'm like, oh, yep. I know that feeling all too well, because that's really how it works in real life. To be a war photographer requires a dose of crazy and some would say irresponsibility, but man, it's also a thrill in my view, and it's one that is very difficult to equalize. I mean, parachuting can be quite thrilling, but it's a whole different ballgame of risk and thrill to be the accompanying reporter during an assault. To survive, you have to be even better than the soldiers because your weapon is the camera. And while sometimes you bond with the soldiers well enough that they will instinctively protect you alongside their comrades, as it is shown in the movie with remarkable accuracy, that, however, is no guarantee. And that is a niche element in the film. I don't think many people appreciated this part for how good it is. The movie wants to tell the story of a civil war from the perspective of jaded, scared journalists who just want to do the best job they can given the circumstances, and it does that remarkably well. Again, whoever consulted for this movie deserves some extra money. It came out beautifully. Also, extra money should be given to the sound editor. The sound is just beautifully edited. Again, as someone who did sound editing for over 20 years, I notice even the slightest mistakes and inaccuracies, and unfortunately those do abound in present-day movies, but not this one. The sound is just great. It reminded me of Dunkirk, another movie with beautifully rendered sound. Now, on to the bad parts. First of all, not enough smoking. I mean, there are a few shots of the characters furiously smoking as they're scared shitless, but nowhere near enough to be realistic. For comparison, check out 20 Days in Mariupol, an actual documentary made by actual war correspondents. Oh, and now I remember that I was supposed to review that one too, and I will eventually. I mean, I don't know, since they delayed the release much longer than needed, I'll delay the review as well. But seriously, you should see that one too. I have yet to meet a real-life war correspondent that doesn't smoke. I'm sure they exist, but I haven't met one yet, and I've met hundreds. Then there's the imagery. While earlier I lauded the work, which is just amazing, the sound work, the imaging part leaves a lot to be desired, unfortunately. Excessive use of stop-frame technique and blur end up being a distraction rather than an enhancer of the experience. I understand what the director wanted to do, but in my opinion, it was a failure. De gustibus et coloribus non disputandum est, says 2,000 plus years old wisdom, but in this case I will dispute the use of colors because it's just taxing at some point while enjoying the film. And then there's the urban fighting scenes. While they are certainly better shot than most contemporary movies, which are straight up cartoons at this point, they're still mediocre compared to movies older than 10 years, confirming a consistent degradation or maybe a competence crisis going on in mainstream American movies when it comes to this particular aspect. I suppose I should be more lenient because the movie is made by a quasi-independent studio, but it also cost $50 million to make. That's not a negligible amount, inflation notwithstanding. And okay, urban warfare scenes can be expensive, but a pile of body scenes aren't. Yet those are also shot terribly as well. Seriously, import a B-lister imaging director from South Korea or Japan. They'll show you how to put real gore on the screen, just saying. And finally, there is the narrative disconnect close to the end. Throughout the movie, we're shown just how random the war is, which is fine. That's exactly how it would work in real life as well. But then at the end, with the final assault on the White House, there's suddenly orderly warfare, especially when the secessionists have the upper hand in every single respect. Give me a break, please. Still, the last 2 minutes of the movie are great storytelling. Too bad that the previous 15 are in stark contrast with the rest of the movie. But hey, I said it's a quite good movie that only looks good by comparison. And prior to the movie rolling, we were served 4 trailers of movies that will soon be released. 2 remakes, otherwise known as Consistent Inspiration and Competence Crisis. A movie I wouldn't even pirate even if you pay me, let alone ever watch it. And one I already forgot by the time I got home and made the initial notes for this video. So yeah, compared to what it has had to compete against, Civil War looks great. But I liked it primarily because it pissed off exactly the kind of people that absolutely deserve to be shat upon. And I like it precisely for its niche elements and nods for connoisseurs, which is a financial risk that was taken by the producers. Now, the risk paid off, although at the cost of terminally online NPCs whining about it. I mean, here's the featured review on IMDb as I'm recording this. Quote, "There is a good movie to be made about the polarization and aggression of US politics leading to civil war. This was not it. Uses a grossly undeveloped political scenario as an excuse to show us routine, gratuitous violence and contrived relationships. Casting an actress who looks 14 as a 23-year-old was a big mistake, and pushing her from wide-eyed innocence through a ridiculous, unbelievable journey to awakening ambition via horror was crudely handled. Taking photos of people while they suffer and die is obscene, and the pain and gore of violence was trivialized, not dignified by this sad movie," unquote. Now this is your standard take for the terminally online American population. Oh no, she looks 14. By what standard? That's something a deeply resentful, sex-negative idiot would say, which, to be fair, it's the majority population in most comment sections in English, so there's that. And once again, complaints that it's not political enough. Well, that is the point. Nobody pays to see a sermon, not in a movie theater. Want to pay for a sermon? Well, there's at least 20 serious conferences per year about potential civil war in the US and Europe with a significant diversity of opinion between them. Go see one of those. Pick your poison, stick with it, enjoy. And with the risk of making this video a bit too long, here's another review that shows to me that there are elements of niche that went over the head of a significant portion of the public. Maybe just a significant minority, maybe even a majority. So another IMDb user says, quote, "The characters feel rather shallow, which is odd considering a majority of the movie is focused solely on them. They also feel more lumped together than a cohesive group," unquote. Well, yes. In the real world, it is in fact quite rare to have 4 journalists forming a cohesive group in a war scenario. Very rare. Ad hoc coalitions on common immediate interests are the norm, because they're there to tell the story, not to participate in it. So the immediate interests are usually survive the day, find the best spot for filming or taking pictures, and pay enough attention to see where the next story could be. And in this order. Cohesion is something for the soldiers to think about. As a war correspondent, you want cohesion with the soldiers and the unit you are accompanying, because those guys quite literally hold your life in their hands. Cohesion with your fellow journalists? Not so much. It's barely an afterthought. But I know this because I've been around the block. What you would call character development happens in real life with war correspondents after the war, and in some cases after some psychiatric treatment too, not during the war. And the director depicted this brilliantly, but again, with the risk of being cursed by, well, the peanut gallery. So yeah, all in all, This picture is a solid 8, in my opinion. Definitely worth watching, and if you can, see it in a theater or via a home cinema system. The sound is just too good to waste it on headphones or cheap speakers. And it's no wonder that the journalists and the chattering classes hated it, because it shows the hard part of journalism and it doesn't glorify it at all, but also doesn't degrade it. Although, here we can quibble that not enough of journalist bias is shown. I mean, it is shown, but like the rest of the movie, it's more implied or alluded to rather than made explicit, which I find great, but also didn't quite go down well with the public. It also doesn't glorify the war itself either, thus lowering the enthusiasm of Civil War LARPers. So basically, if you're looking for your biases to be confirmed, well, that only works out if you have personal experience with covering conflict zones in any capacity. Otherwise, not so much. So yeah, that's all I had to say. Have you watched it yet? Well, tell me in the comments. Maybe I'm wrong, though it's such a good piece of art that it makes being wrong relatively easy, and that's why I recommend it. And with all of that being said, I'll get back to editing Central Asia videos coming up soon. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all soon on the Freedom Alternative. Cheers.